the point that you just hit on, I think, is an amazing point in regards to the transformation of the focus of fans, and it's probably permeated to the players in terms of this hyper focus about playoff. What does this mean for the playoff? Like, we could be playing, X, Y, and Z school this week that is completely faceless to us otherwise. But if it's means something toward the playoff, that's more important than playing Notre Dame, where as generations ago, and even we talk about some of the great uh, landmark games in this series, and we think probably most recently the one that comes to mind is, of course, 2005. That was still about Notre Dame and USC.
Yes, it was.
And not what the implications were. Those were kind of in the background. So that's a tremendous point that you made, that it kind of just hit me in a different way right then.
And it's important to note about the 2005 game, because it was in South Bend, it was in mid-October. Yeah. So, like, it was just so early in the season that you're not thinking, well, about the 1 versus 2 in the BCS title game. It was mid-October. Like, it's just beat the other guy because it's in mid-October. But when you play in LA at the end of the season, yeah, it hits very different because it's right before the conference championship game. And for Notre Dame, it's the end of the Irish's regular season slate. And so, the big game in this series, at least in the past 40 years, which was in LA, which had national championship implications, was 1988. 1 versus 2, Tony Rice versus Rodney Peete in the Coliseum. So it's been 34 years since we've had USC and Notre Dame playing in the Coliseum at the end of the regular season with supreme national championship implications. I mean, in 2006, USC had just lost to UCLA, so that didn't have the same type vibe for that game, and Notre Dame was not unbeaten, so it was not a top line national championship playing game for both teams. But the 88 was the playing game for both teams. 2002, both teams were really good, but also were not part of the national championship mix. Ohio State and Miami, were on that collision course that year. So you do have to go back to 88 for the last time a USC Notre Dame game in the Coliseum had top line national championship implications for both teams involved. So you don't have quite that here, with only USC being in the national title picture, being in the playoff picture. But, this is Lincoln Riley's first game against Notre Dame. And so, like, if I'm him, I'm saying, like, I want to get off to a good start against the Irish. I want to be 1-0 against the Irish. So, like, that should be the foremost point of focus. And the other thing is just, like, this team, there's still so much room to grow. Like, I made the point earlier in this broadcast, Mark, before you came on, that USC scored 48 against UCLA and left a lot of points on the field. Dennis Lynch missing 2 field goals under 35 yards. You had Brendan Rice dropping another pass. Like, he drops one every week. And, that's on Lincoln Riley for keeping him out there. Like, he needs to be benched, and he needs, the Kyle Ford, Taj Washington, Michael Jackson. They don't drop passes. They need to be ahead of Rice in the wide receiver rotation. But anyway, the larger point being that USC could be a 60-point per game offense. Now, it's not going to score 60 against Marcus Freeman's defense, but the larger point stands that USC is putting up big numbers and still is leaving 10, 13, 17 points per game on the field. And so if this team can stop leaving 13, 17 points on the field, well, you look at how Georgia played against Kentucky, not very well at all. That was a really ugly game, and Georgia's offense is certainly vulnerable. Like, I'm no longer thinking that if it's USC Georgia in the Peach Bowl, like, of course I'm picking Georgia, but I don't think it's an absolute lock. Giving Lincoln Riley a month to prepare and seeing that Georgia's offense is capable of pulling a clunker, or at least, it's less than fully efficient. Like, I'm not treating that game as a lock anymore. I certainly would have done so, a month ago, but I'm not really quite there now. But yet I kind of feel guilty for even mentioning that, because, like, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't want to be talking about the playoff. It's really about Notre Dame, and in addition to this week being about Notre Dame and USC not getting distracted, there's also just the matter of USC is in a real feast or famine situation. Obviously, USC's done a lot of feasting to this point, and it's 10-1, and it's going to be in the Pac-12 championship game no matter what. So a lot of goals already achieved, but still. So USC, because it has a 13th game to play before the Bowls, everyone wants, but also you could go 1-1 and you could go 0-2. Now, if you go 2-0, you go to the playoff. But if you go 0-2, USC probably falls all the way out of the New Year's Six. I mentioned last week on the show that, if USC splits UCLA Notre Dame, should be in decent shape for the New Year's Six. But of course, by beating UCLA, you now add another game. So it was kind of too complicated to think about a 3-game sequence before the third game had been earned, before the third game was officially part of the schedule. So now we're truly in a 2-game sequence. There will be 2 more games for USC before the Bowls. And so if USC loses both games to Notre Dame and in the Pac-12 title game, could fall out of the New Year's Six. I'd say probably would, just because if you're dropping 2 games in a row like that probably takes you out of the top 12. I mean, Tennessee fell a pretty long way, just getting blown out in 1 game by South Carolina. So if USC loses twice, it probably goes to the Alamo Bowl. I mean, it probably misses the New Year's Six entirely. And so really, after a season with so many accomplishments and so many achievements, it's really important to at least win one of these next 2 games to get to the New Year's Six. And people are going to be talking about the playoff and talking about running the table. Again, we all want that. We all hope for that. But you really want to knuckle down and make sure you bag at least one of these 2 wins, because then the floor is the Cotton Bowl. If USC splits the last 2, the floor is the Cotton Bowl, the ceiling's the Rose Bowl. You really want to make sure that you walk away with that. You do not want to be going to the Alamo Bowl after all that USC has achieved this season. So that's another reason why the playoff talk just can't be allowed to filter too much into the ears of the players. Of course, it's going to be there. Like, you can't block it out, you can't eliminate it. But like Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch really have a very big task keeping this team focused on the goal at hand. Now, I think Caleb Williams is going to really help a lot, because as I mentioned earlier on this show, he's good at playing within himself. Like he's not, sometimes he'll make a risky throw the way every quarterback does, but like, he's not especially reckless. He does try to stick with plays. He really tries to stick to Lincoln Riley's structure. He's not reckless the way DTR was for UCLA in this past game. So I think that restraint that Caleb Williams has already cultivated as a sophomore is going to serve USC well on offense. But on defense, maybe guys are going to try to make hero plays instead of staying in their lanes, staying in their gaps. And given the way Notre Dame has improved on the offensive line in recent weeks, I can see USC being very undisciplined in its run fits, and Notre Dame, mashing USC and controlling the ball for 38 minutes and checking a lot of the boxes the Irish need to win this game. So USC really needs to be task-oriented on defense, not being caught out of position, which we've seen so much over the past month. It's going to be really interesting to see if Alex Grinch can get his guys focused against a team that, he knows they're going to have to run the ball. You don't want Drew Pine chucking the ball, several dozen times. You want to be able to mash with the running game and then use play action with short passes to the tight ends. Michael Mayer in particular, it's going to require a lot of discipline for USC to not get caught on a pendulum in terms of, overrunning the running plays and biting on play action. It's going to be a different kind of test relative to UCLA, but it doesn't mean it's going to be an easier test. It's just going to be a very different one. And if you're thinking about the playoff and you're thinking about, how much there is to lose, instead of just treating this Notre Dame game as an opportunity, like, that's how the roof can cave in for the USC defense, and this Notre Dame opportunity can fall apart.